at the turn of the century, we really started, like lots of working class communities, but particularly in Barking and Dagenham, and I cover this in my book, Despised, we started to see the impacts of globalization in a really significant way. So we saw deindustrialization, we saw rapid demographic change, and that disorientated many local people. They were bewildered by that phenomenon, they were disorientated by it, and they looked at their leaders, they looked at the political establishment, the Labour Party, Blair at the time, and said, look, can you slow this down? We understand change happens, but this is really violating our sense of order and our sense of place. And again, in a completely patronising way, the political establishment looked at that community and said, this is good for you, this is what the world is now, this is it's going to improve GDP, cultural enrichment and all the rest of it. And what thousands of families did, and 40,000 people in the space of a decade in Barking and Dagenham, just simply upped and left and said that this community has changed so fundamentally and so rapidly. I was living there at the time, so I saw this. I knew it was going on. They said, look, this is not somewhere we recognise anymore. And so what they did is they went to places where culturally it was more familiar, they were more familiar with. Some people called it white flight, but it wasn't white flight. It wasn't about skin colour. It was simply a flight to familiarity, as some people have called it. So they'd go to Kent, or they'd go to the Essex coast, and places like Clacton-on-Sea are now called Little Dagenham. So that is what the impacts can do on working class communities. That's the fragmentation and the atomisation that can happen. I've been arguing on the left for years that unless we get a grip of this, some of the things that did come to pass would come to pass. And I wasn't surprised that it did, frankly. It's
amazing. It does seem like it was so obvious it was going to all happen this way, in a sense. And it did do. And then, and in many respects, Tommy Robinson, who was vilified, and I know he's a complex figure, but when I was a kid, he was like, Voldemort, he was Hitler, he was the worst thing. And he grew up with one mosque in his local town. And it used to be okay. Remember, Stacey Dooley did a documentary in the BBC. We could actually talk about, well, this is a bit of an issue for local people. Couldn't do that now. So I guess what I'm saying is we've just had MPs calling for blasphemy laws. I think Starmer is actually about to do that. I saw Angela Rayner was going on about what was that? Islamophobia, new laws, new set of laws for these things as well.
Islamophobia Council, yeah.
And you think, and I think maybe I think this as well, they're not sort of, these are not, Angela Rayner's not evil. These are not evil people thinking, well, how we're going to turn this into Islamabad or something, that we're going to make it harder for women to walk the streets. They're just ideologues, I suppose.
They're ideologues, and I think there's a certain amount of seeking social and political kudos by being seen as very enlightened and progressive and liberal on these views, and it's seen as very kind of inclusive. But the reality is that when they peddle a lot of these policies in the name of inclusivity, quite often it's exclusionary to a large part of the population. A large part of the population will say, well, do you know what? Muslims, for example, I think should be able to attend their mosque and to worship their God and to live their life as they see fit within the law. But actually, I don't think we need an Islamophobia council. I don't think we need to be ring-fencing Islam from criticism or scrutiny or even mockery, which is the fear I think a lot of people have. And I think there's a sense also among people that they understand that the reason politicians do this is particularly, with the Muslim community, it's not just about inclusivity and being seen as enlightened and progressive and all the rest of it. It's actually out of fear. There's a fear there that actually if we allow people to criticize a particular religion, if we allow people to burn a holy book or to depict a particular prophet in art, for example, then there's going to be riots in some communities. Well, sooner or later, you've got to make a decision. Do we challenge and push back on that stuff, or do we keep indulging it? Because if you keep indulging it, you get to a point where you have a school teacher in Batley in West Yorkshire, for example, who, without any malice at all, did what he did in terms of showing a profit to the students, and now his life is changed forever, and he's still in hiding. No one, as far as I'm aware, has ever been brought before the law for the intimidation that particular teacher suffered. So sooner or later, we're going to have to decide, look, either we resist this and we push back forcefully, and we say, look, yes, whilst on the one hand, all people of faith are entitled to follow their religion, what you're not entitled to do is to say, within our society, which has traditionally defended freedom of expression and satire, the right to criticise religions, you're not going to stop films from being shown in a theatre by bullying the theatre management. You're not going to demand that people be put in prison because they've burnt a holy book. I don't think people should burn holy books personally. Yeah. You shouldn't do it gratuitously. It's not something I would ever do. But equally, I don't think people should be arrested because they've decided to do it. If it's their only if it's their own personal property, that's a matter for them.
The scariest thing about the most recent guy who did that was, within a minute, just in the middle of London, there was just somebody walking by who was extreme enough to get a knife and jump on him with this big knife. And then seconds later, Deliveroo cyclist comes past and kicks him in the head. And it's like, that's just a random place in London, and it took minutes for that to happen. It feels, I feel like I've been told my whole life, like, oh, it's only a very, very tiny percentage of people of that belief system. I'm now starting to feel like, well, this is a belief system every bit as extreme as Scientology, let's say. And if we had 10% of our population Scientologists, I think there'd be a much bigger national conversation about it.
Well, I think, there are parts of Islam that actually I think are very worthy and virtuous. I think the emphasis on family life, the abstinence from alcohol, not something I could ever do personally, but nonetheless, they do it because they believe in it, because they think it helps bring about a more ordered society and so on. I think you can go through the tenets of Islam and say, actually, there's a crossover between some of this stuff and traditional Christianity, if you like. So I wouldn't suggest that it's some sort of entire hateful religion, because it isn't. Although there are certainly elements within it that are backward and reactionary, and elements within its adherents who are certainly backward and reactionary, and it's that needs to be challenged. But at the same time, I think we have to be far more confident as a country about asserting our own way of life robustly, and our own culture and our own, if you like, Christian values. And I'm not a practicing Christian. I probably call myself a Christian agnostic. Tony Benn, my political hero, called himself that, and that's probably what I would call myself. But we are scared almost to assert, if you like, our way of life and our own history and our own traditions. And I don't know of any other country, frankly, whose elites are so determined the whole time to trash their own history and traditions and to kind of try to put them to one side in the name of trying to make everybody feel welcome.